Hi, and welcome to our podcast on Wednesday. We're going to be doing the weekly trade intelligence briefing now. So we do the post every week, which obviously you can read, but now we're going to be doing it through a podcast as well. So you have the choice whether you want to listen or whether you want to read. So again, it gives you them options, and there's other podcasts as you can see in here. To subscribers from our newsletter, thanks for joining us on here. We want to put it all in one central place. So today we're going to be talking about what the news is this week. I've got quite a few topics to go through, so off I go. And let's have a look to see where we are. Sorry, I find it really annoying sometimes when you use different platforms. So some of what we're going to be talking about today is supply chains, global supply chains kind of shifting beyond China. We've already talked about in that plus one on Monday's podcast, trade policy. Trade policy increasing link to national security, industrial resilience across major economies. So again, something to really be thinking about. And we're going to touch on a bit of e-commerce, cross-border and e-commerce growth is driving increasing customs scrutiny. We also introduced again back the student corner and the entrepreneur corner, and we will introduce the book club back into this as well from next week. But we just wanted to start here, but we'll be introducing to any of our followers who enjoy reading snippets on the book club. We'll also be including that next Wednesday. So breaking international trade news, so WTO. So the WTO, if anybody's not familiar with the WTO, it's the World Trade Organization. Several economies are discussing alternative digital trade. So we're seeing digital trade coming much more into the forefront now of international trade, and WTO, who, they're the forefront for the movement of goods through either trade agreements or non-trade agreements sitting under WTO rules. Helping developing countries through different trading schemes. The Trade Facilitation Act, fantastic act, was introduced in 2019, which is now starting to go up on strength to strength. And then also the GSP, General Systems Preferences, the UK, if you're in the UK, you may know it now as the DCTS, Developing Countries Trading Scheme, that helps developing countries be sustainable themselves, and with that it keeps their economies going and increases wealth within their countries and drives people within their own economies rather than moving out to other G7 or other major economies. So again, it's about supporting developing countries. What they're focusing on: digital trade controls or governing asserting greater authority over cross-border digital flow and platforms. Data governance, data localization, and obviously rules creating new compliance obligations for businesses. Competition within technology, strategic rivalry, intensifying around semiconductors, AI, critical tech supply chains, and industrial protection, strategic industries and national champions increasing shielded through policy and regulations. So again, international trade policies we've seen is coming more policy driven and compliance led. So again, it's very important, and this is the channel really to come to. If I'm being honest, subscribe, it's free. There's lots of things we're going to be introducing in the next. We've got a very clear strategy, and please be part of it. Business and digital trade econ may face increasing regulatory complexity, and again, that's certainly we're seeing that in lots of other channels, as in Amazon. Etsy, all these things now. There's more scrutiny now on goods entering and moving, especially when it's international trade or when goods are being imported either into the UK or into the EU or into other countries. We've already seen huge challenges with the US recently, Section 232, and other challenges at borders. Trade and compliance, or ONS, or ONS data, we're seeing here in the UK. So we've seen 937 billion total UK exports reaching in reports period. That's about 1.7 goods exports down. So again, we're seeing physical trade having a bit of challenges in 2026. Service exports are increasing, again, reflecting strong professional and technical demand. So service industry or the service exports are certainly going up, and the goods export with a bit of a challenge there. But interestingly, 11.3% exports to the US, to the United States, there's 11.3. Does that not tell you the recent visit of King Charles could have a huge effect on a trade agreement? It's our biggest trading partner, single trading partner. We're aligned with them. This is never going to get a better time to get a better trade deal than we've got now. Whether you agree with Trump and policies, at the end of the day, we're not politicians. We can't control that, but what we can control is get the best deal we can for the UK exporters and also for our importing side as well. So we make it a very financial worth agreement under the free trade agreement or an agreement that really suits both parties, not just one, because we have a very level playing field when it comes to surplus between our exports and their exports. So it's a great time to do some sort of trade deal, I think. Why do they matter? Obviously, UK economy increasingly relies on professional services, engineering support, technical consultancy, technical-led experts, technical consultancies. Wonder if I come under that. AI. Exports continue facing one of the challenges we're seeing on exports, and it's quite driven when you talk about border friction, tariff pressures, volatility. It's a challenge. So there's two challenges here, but certainly in export, but there's a lot of support there. Don't make this as difficult as it is because it's not. If you know what you're doing from a compliance point, again, well-prepared strategies and making sure you understand customs and your commodity codes and all the key things we're talking about today makes a huge difference when you're exporting. RHS, or when we talk about the Road Haulage Association, obviously they're highlighting operational risk linked to increasing EU border controls, obviously including new EU entry and exit requirements. I will be doing a talk with the IRH on the podcast next month down in Peterborough, and these are the key areas we will be talking about. Border delays, increasing processing times at key crossings, administration burden, new documentation requirements, very confusing, and driver disruption, obviously uncertainty affecting driver availability and route planning. The slower it is, the harder it is then for everything to move. And just some figures on that, just to give you an idea. 300,000 weekly HGV movements a week, 10,000 daily at Dover. Dover alone can process around 10,000 freight vehicles daily. That's huge, and even small border delays can quickly create additional logistics cost margins and supply chain disruption. So, when you start to see the amount of roads, how many times you go on a motorway or you go on an air road or A1 and the amount of vehicles you see on there, it's incredible, isn't it? You're in that lane, aren't you? Driving along and you're going nice and nice, and that lorry pulls out to obviously overtake because somebody's either dawdled, and then they spend about 25 minutes, racing each other up, and you're in the meantime doing your 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour behind. I know I shouldn't moan, should I? But I'm there, I've been there, got the t-shirt, I see it every week when I'm going down to Cambridge and other places. And yes, it's great, but it just shows you the sheer volume on the roads is incredible. E-commerce and small parcels, so cross-border e-commerce continues expanding. After customs authorities increasing the focus on parcel level compliance, we're seeing that a lot now. So again, you've seen the challenges with making sure the low values and all this. The EU have introduced, the UK, it's a huge challenge. So low value consignments offer scrutinising diminished. So again, that diminished which was brought in is now being challenged. VAT obligation on imports costs tightening across multiple jurisdictions. So again, who's paying for this? Is it DDP? Who's the physical payer of this? Is the VAT being paid? Product origin. So are people using the correct origins when they're delivering? Do people know that when it's certainly in e-commerce? Parcel level customs data. One of the big challenges with e-commerce particularly is the sheer volume and the sheer speed of this. It's very difficult to control, and most companies are not adapt to this in the industry. So again, it causes lots of challenge when there's customs involved, and there's a compliance layer within that causes its challenges within itself. So again, just things to think about. Again, why does it matter? It delays at customs, additional duty exposure, customer dissatisfaction. Business increasingly requires strong customs visibility, proactive investment in customs data quality. Again, understanding that, making sure your documents, your invoicing, your packing, you've filled out the correct document on the e-commerce, on your courier. When you're doing it on the courier, everything's correctly done. Again, if it's not, sits in a black hole, gets very costly. Nobody knows what's happening with it. Ultimately, it's a dissatisfied customer. Country focus this week on our trade newsletter is on Vietnam. Vietnam has 6% in GDP growth, remains above, which is a very strong area. 370 billion annual exports. It's huge when it comes to the particularly for Vietnam. It's a huge market. Again, I'm just looking at things. I think maybe I'll have a look at that. Vietnam is a member of both CPTPP and ICP. The UK obviously sits within there where they get, so if you're buying from Vietnam, you get it at a reduced rate. Again, it's very interesting to see and see a lot more shift in supply chain is more moving towards the Vietnam, Malaysia, which we talked about, aren't we, on the +1 for China. Very interesting. What is manufacturing opportunities, manufacturing sourcing, logistics support, engineering service distribution partnerships. Key manufacturing sectors as we see, electronics, consumer products, furniture, textile, machinery. So again, the opportunities there for sourcing, but make sure you understand the whole distribution network around the logistics, how many containers how many shipping lines are coming out of here now. Obviously, it's getting bigger and bigger, but again, making sure that you've fully planned if you want to look at Vietnam. But just that, we will be focusing on one market every week, just to show you what data's out there and what we're seeing. Again, changing manufacturing, compliance tip of the day, we'll say, changing manufacturing country, changing customs. Again, if you're changing and you're moving things, make sure you're fully aware that whoever's supporting you when you move your manufacturing, if you're moving from places like China and other places, you're going into the EU or you're going into place like Vietnam, make sure you fully understand that transformation. So the product must undergo sufficient processing, the manufacturing process, the documentation, the trade agreement. Make sure if you're buying from someone that you fully understand what the origin of that product is, because ultimately that will allow you to bring goods in at a lower dutiful rate here in the UK and in other countries as well, where there's opportunities either under GSP, trade agreements, or maybe the DCTS scheme. Again, just on the diagnostics we've put on here, we have a diagnostics review that people can do. And we've introduced a few new ones. We've got an export readiness, so if you're new to the market, you can do a review. We've got a documentation and compliance review and a commodity course. So if you want us to check your commodity course, we've got 3 sections there or 3 offers you can do there. Or you can do the full diagnostics. The pricing's there. Again, contact us if it's something you're interested in. It's certainly worth it for the amount of money you're going to pay. Get somebody to check it and make sure you're fully compliant. Get the report. Gives you traffic light system scoring. Green, obviously everything's fine. Amber, a bit, needs to look at. Red, you got a bit of a problem you need to look at and sort out. And that will save you a lot of money when you're exporting or even importing. Can save you a lot of money at border. Next week's we're going to be concentrating on the US-China trade developments, cross-border regulations, WTO, obviously we're going to keep up, geopolitical, shipping. We'll have a look at the freight and the shipping lines and see what rates we're seeing at the moment. Again, we'll introduce them in next week's newsletter. We're going to be studying that for the next week and see what rates we're getting. Anybody who's subscribed to our newsletter will get this every week and they would see this pattern, but we're just now highlighting it through a podcast as well. Again, students and entrepreneurs, so we've introduced that back in now. What successful exporters combine. So if you're in the student, you're entrepreneur. Again, your commercial strategy, understanding target markets, pricing, and competitive positioning. Making sure you've got documentation control. Again, accurate docs, accurate commercial invoice with all the correct information. Your logistics, relying on a logistics, a freight carrier, and making sure you've got a good, reliable freight forwarder. Customs, understanding your customs, and understand your supply chain visibility. International trade remains the growth opportunity, but operational such becoming increasingly important. So it's balancing itself now. It used to be very much growth, and then operational and structure and everything was a little bit lower. It's now creeping above that side of it. So make sure you fully understand that, and that's what the channel's all about. It's there to help you and support you. Again, cross-border, just some figures here that we got out, some data from our trade intelligence data. Cross-border e-commerce growth, 7.9 trillion projected by 2030. It's huge. It's huge. Online trade focus costs over 25% compound annual growth. Online consumers, it's mind-boggling, it, some of the figures you see. Annual parcels. I mean, you imagine, parcel force or lots of these couriers, and we complain to them and we say, oh, you're not doing this right. Can you imagine if you're bringing 1 million parcels in a week and you got customs declarations for them and some are faulty or some are faulty, some are not correct. How do you manage that? It's a huge, huge volume, isn't it? It really is. We're talking massive volumes and controlling that. So again, just give you some data. It gives you a good understanding when you're working with your parcel carrier, and sometimes things do go missing and they shouldn't do, and it's just a genuine mistake. Just have a bit of a thought of how much is physically moving around the globe. It's huge amounts, and mistakes do happen. It's just natural, but hopefully it gets resolved quickly. But what you don't want to do is get stuff stuck when it's in customs. That's the challenge, because if you can imagine as a carrier, so it gets stuck in customs, they're going to leave it in customs. They're going to move on to the next thing. They don't have the time and resource to be spending loads of time on that. They'll wait and wait for somebody in customs to let their customs team know. But you could be waiting a couple of days for that. So don't try and avoid that. Make it easy for the parcel carrier. They can only do what they can do. They can't help if something suddenly gets stuck. If it's their mistake, yes, they'll rectify it. If it's your mistake, it's going to cost you. So again, make sure you're fully aware. And you can just see the sheer volumes. It's huge amount. And again, just the systems, as we see systems, fashion custom systems, border infrastructure, last mile logistics, trade data accuracy. This is all the challenges under the OECD Statista and international e-commerce reports. So we've got the data from in our trade intelligence. We're picking up all this data. It's quite a mouthful, that, I need to try and say all that together. But there's challenges in there. Obviously, I'm trying to read this as a newsletter, so I'll try and be as serious as we can be. Just this week at a glance, so we've looked at WTO in digital trade, UK export performance, IH border pressure, and every week we'll keep on this and make sure you're fully aware. Vietnam opportunity, again, the huge challenge, the huge amount of trade that's there, the opportunities within that, and e-commerce compliance within your parcels. Again, next week we'll introduce the book. We always used to cover book on our Mailport newsletter that we sent out every week. Would study a book and then give you some insights. That we'll do that again next week because it's quite interesting to see. I do actually like doing that side of it. Again, key takeaways: policy-driven trade. So policies driving trade. There's no question about our national security, industrial resilience. Compliance is non-negotiable, unfortunately, and opportunity remains. There's a lot more scrutiny. One thing that happened a year ago, 2 years ago, with the US, with Mr. Trump, he started to look at things and he wasn't happy. Now, the worst thing, obviously, sometimes it's good having a businessman in charge, and other times it can be a bit of a challenge. And he saw that there was a lot of goods coming into the US and not a lot of taxes being collected. His then stance on that was, hang on a minute, how does that work? And he started to look at what it did. Forget that, it created a ripple effect across the whole world trade market, and lots of countries are under a lot of scrutiny. So what we're seeing now is it's kind of the last stage of that. It's where it's been highlighted. It's whether you agree with it or not. But what it's done, it's had a ripple effect on all countries to start looking at their compliance. UK are no different, and it's happened in the EU and other countries. The EU will be looking at CBAM in the coming weeks and get a better understanding of how CBAM's working. And again, that's the whole point of the YouTube channel. It's to help you all in one place. Please subscribe. That's all we ask from you. Stay ahead. We ask you, weekly trade intelligence, custom supply chain analysis. We've got the podcast on Monday. Obviously, our Wednesday one now we're going to be doing the trade intelligence because we just thought it'd be good that you can listen to it rather than just read. And then on Friday we're doing our sales and strategies. So lots of information. We have shorts on there. We have lots of videos in there, lots of support. So again, it'd be great for you to subscribe to us. That's all we ask, nothing else. And thanks for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next week and with the new newsletter. It'll be in the post. So again, when I say in the post, I mean if you go on the YouTube channel and if you go into post, all our posts now weeklies will be in there. So if you want to read it, you can read it and go into a bit more detail, or if you want to just listen to the podcast, that's fine. So thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week or on Friday on our new podcast. Thank you.